Inshallah, to muna gina Miftau Iddrisu shi su continue. Ba za mu ja kuɗi wa inshallah. Sheikh Salim ya bude muna minti uku na shi na so ya zo shi mu yamma. Please, Quran is going to be recited here. Some silence, please, before we continue with the program. Some silence, please. Quran is going to be recited. Musamu ikuli sannan Quran inshallah. Jazakumullahu khair. Salim zai karanta mana mutum ya Quran ne girma inshallah. Wala tafaddal. Thank you.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين.
جزاك الله
Louder, we can't hear you.
See, a lot of traumas come from having like a broken family or just neglect from parents, even though both parents are still there. And obviously this can have an effect on the child even as an adult whilst having their own children. And obviously this can lead to those same children reciprocating those same things, or like same things that their parents done to them on their own children, and thinking it's like normal, like this is how you're supposed to be treating your children. And I see that there's a lot of fathers here, and there's some of us that want to be fathers in the future. What advice would you give us to be able to like overcome that, or to not let like these sort of things affect us as fathers in the future?
Alhamdulillah is a very important question to ask, and is when you think about it, if you don't know how to drive, how can you teach someone to know how to drive? You can't. So if the father grew up in an environment that the child care and the child voice is not important, then they will also accidentally, not knowing, pass the same awareness to the next generation. So you have what we call a generational problem, where generation after generation family system has remained the same because there is no update. How I'm treating you is the same way I've been treated. So the trauma gets transferred from one person to another. But the fact that you weren't taught how to drive doesn't mean you have to remain in that state. What we are talking about is that the children learn to absorb what they learn in their environment, and they also become adults who will repeat it unless they find other ways of dealing with the same issue. Like we spoke about the state-specific memory. If how I grew up, how I was guided to bring a child up is how I'm going to transfer unless I get another information. Now, if the person that gave you that information is someone you hold in high esteem, therefore you feel almost obliged to repeat that information or that pattern of coping. Now, this we are asking you to reconsider. Trauma is real. The impact it has on children is real. And this is the reality of it. If the child absorbs the idea that I'm unworthy, I'm not good enough, I can never be good enough, they become an adult that reacts to things or don't try. Because they've already got the imprint that whatever I do is not going to end up well. So you have people who remain the same. They will remain the same level. It's not that they don't have the talent, but the words that has been said from the beginning has absorbed them. So they become adults who are very fearful of applying themselves because they don't want to fail. But by not trying, you are also failing. But it feels safer to remain the same. People ask why is that? Because you became frozen in that memory. So it's easier to stay there than to move away from it. Is it deliberate? No. You don't even know you are reacting to it. It just feels that the chances passes you by, the cycle goes you back because you don't believe in yourself. So in those regards, the child grows up and it feels like maybe my level is this. And that's why it's very important that we modify that response. Why do we need to modify that response? So that if the first and the second generation are carrying the trauma, the third generation shouldn't. But we have to be intentional. Because what we are trying to fight against, we don't always see it. It's unconscious. When we feel like if I finish, this is enough for me, I'm just gonna, but also to see that we've got the talent. What is holding you back? The environment is conducive for you to apply yourself, but the part of you isn't settled. Because sometimes what we say to children follows them. The brain of a child is like a sponge. Whatever you throw at it, it grabs it. And that early years is very, very important because it sets an imprint. Even later, when they have actually succeeded, there is still that fear inside of them because that's the beginning. And that's why when you look at it, the child is an amana to you and you have to show them compassion. And that compassion is very, very important because if they can't learn how to express compassion, what the reason tells us is that the child learns to detach. When the child learns to detach, they go to children who they think the children become parents to them. So whatever those children say goes, and whatever you say goes away. Now, what the reason is also telling us is that then when the child doesn't know how to be vulnerable, they can't connect with you. Why? Because a child cannot bring an adult up. An adult cannot bring a child up. When you have children bringing children up, either because of the start of children. Because now the children have more power because of the platform. Brothers and sisters, this is a very, very important thing that we need to stand up and be mindful of. If the child doesn't have that external, the healthy boundaries and responsibilities set up for them, they stop to fear. How many times now have you heard somebody is drowning and somebody is taking a photo of the person? There is no connection with the human. Why? Because for a child to learn to do that, you have to teach them. When the child is bringing themselves up with an absent parent, then the child can learn to be vulnerable. They have to be strong. And then because they have to be strong, they have to be detached. Because they have to be detached, they become very fearless. Because the child becomes fearless, they can take risk. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
So this risk means that when you put something very fearful to him, he doesn't have the fear. The fear has to be taught. And now when there is nobody, they've learned to become like stones. Because of that, we are having spiritual, it's like you are talking, there is dozens of things. You have a paper that I read where an average child will have, I think as way back at 2017, on their phone, they will have, in a span of 12 months, they will have exposure to adverts specific for children, over 30,000 exposure targeting children. Now, there is 8,732 hours in a year. The child is getting 30,000 exposures. You ask the parent, how many hours have you got in a day to influence that? So we are up against it. And we are up against it if we don't stand firm and work on this generational impact. We'll keep transferring it and it will become evidence to the children. And they become quite detached to what they have to be given, because if the violation happens, the detachment happens. If the detachment happens, the emotion becomes like that of stone. So when we talk, it just bounces, it doesn't go in, because they have the other parent that is on the phone. And some of the things that the child is being taught from there is quite easy to follow. So that's why it's important, as parents, you have to consider what your values are. You know, this is what happens to me, but do I think it's okay to transfer it to my children? And if I transfer it to them, what will happen to their children and the children of their children? And that's why we need to really consider what is going on at the moment. Trauma is not a made-up thing. It does affect children, it does affect adults, it does affect our relationship with ourselves, it does affect how we look at other people in the street. I hope I've answered your question.
Now, let's
So, with the question you asked, Miftau has made justice already, but I thought I wanted to bring a different perspective to it. Because the question you asked, I think you are more looking at you, not you per se, but your generation becoming parents and how you can parent your kids in terms of how you can be parented. So with parenting, there are so many dynamics that happen in our community, which we've normalized them. We've normalized them in such a way that, unfortunately, majority of us doesn't understand what affection means. Affection, it comes in so many different ways. For some parents, buying their kids expensive stuff is the way they show affection. For some people, it's about hugging and being tactile. For other people, it's about being there with the child. Irrespective of what they do, they can't tell them no. And the other one that is very familiar to us in the way of showing affection in our local community is actually being hard on our kids. Very, very, very criticizing our kids. We hardly praise our kids. Even if they do something good, all we see is the negative one, including myself. We all do it. Irrespective of the fact that we have experienced that growing up and we didn't like it and we want to stop. But unfortunately, this has become a fabric whereby we carry with us. Sometimes you say certain things and then you reflect on it and you're like, oh, I shouldn't have said it that way. There are parents who will go back and apologize to their kids, or they will find another way of making up to that. But majority of us, we don't, because we are parents. But the thing with parenting is, we are not perfect. If you are not a perfect human being, how can you be a perfect parent? And how can you bring up a perfect child? We are not saying we shouldn't criticize our kids, but I think for parents, what we have to start thinking about is the words that comes out of our mouths and how our kids are interpreting the words that comes out of our mouth is very important. We might think we are being that way for them to be able to become a responsible adult. But unfortunately, majority of the time, it turns into a trauma for the child. So with trauma, apart from having big traumas like accidents and stuff like that, we also have trauma that is called developmental trauma. It's the little things that happen in the house and how the kids are interpreting it and how it creates anxiety in them. So, for us to be able to move away from these things, especially our younger generation growing up, I think it's about communication. As parents, we are used to growing up and being told, you should back the kunya. But we find ourselves in a society whereby kids are being encouraged to express themselves, which is a good thing, but it's the tone that is being used that becomes an issue. So we all have to start learning how to speak to our kids for them to be able to become adults who will become parents who will know how to speak to their children. But for us to do that, we need education, a lot of education, in such a way that it's going to help us to hold our hands up as parents and say, we don't always get things right. The way we speak to our spouses, the way we end every conversation with insults, and the way we can be very condescending. And when we talk about very condescending, what we mean is we put each other down. Anything that we say, even though we want to say it in a nice way, but the way it comes out, it's about putting the other person down. And our kids are watching this. Even though the youth don't like it, unfortunately, it becomes a fabric whereby they are also exercising it. So, the questions to answer or round up what you've just asked, I think from this program that we are having, it will be good for us to have like platforms for youth. I am thinking about having one for the young ladies, and I think we can have one for the young men or youth, so that education, we can start educating each other, not just our youth. We, the parents, we are not perfect. Nobody showed any parent how to bring up a child. I remember when I started having my children, and my first child was in primary school, and there was this program that came up for parenting. So it came up that all parents should go for that training. Initially, I looked at them like, why are they going to teach me? Why should I have to go to this training? But Alhamdulillah, because of the job I do, I saw the importance of it and I did go. What I learned out of that training, to be able to train my kids, is invaluable. Because what that did was, it brought another perspective to what I already know and how I was brought up. So we all have a room to improve and to learn for us to be able to address the issues that our brother has just brought up, because it is real in our homes and is causing a lot of trauma in our children. Jazakumullah khairan.
Wait a little.
There was just one more question for the same.
Who's talking now? The same person. What? Are you putting how many questions?
My laptop.
Okay. Great.
So different people have like different ways of dealing with trauma. So how would you like advise us to approach someone that we know is dealing with some type of trauma but are hesitant to speak about it?
Thank you. That's a very good question. It starts with if you have a car and it has the car end up having a flat tire, would you carry on and ignore it? If you did, what will happen to the car? So denial of what you are going through compounds the problem. None of us is made of steel. When you look at the roads, you look at a car, you look at the aeroplane, if you get to the airport quick enough, you can see that they service them before they go up there. What time do you have to service your brain? And you think about it, you've only got one brain to last you a lifetime. And if you don't look after it, and you don't nourish it, how is it going to last? So as a brother, sat in this chair, if you are going through trauma or life difficulties or any challenges, the first point is to acknowledge it. And to acknowledge it and to also be open to what it means. If it's an abuse, you have to acknowledge it. This is what has happened. Until you acknowledge it, how are you going to address the problem? Because it doesn't exist if you don't acknowledge it. So when you acknowledge it, then you become open to what is it that I need to do? How is this affecting me now? Is that how I want to live my life? If the answer is no, then where can I get the right support? So you are similar to, Musa alayhi salam. I'm desperate in need of your help. So he was making mention of his pain. So we also have to acknowledge our pain. If it's despair, if it's frustration, if it's powerlessness, if it's out of control, you have to acknowledge it first. And then you look at it, what am I going to do about it? What establishment do I need to approach to help me? If you can address it, then address it. If you can't, then look at where are the services that I can access to help me to achieve it. But I will always encourage all of us that we are not made of steel. Life happens, and life do affect us. If you look around us, everything around us needs looking after. If it snows now on our roads, very soon you see the potholes. If even it's a plant, and if you overwater it, it dies. So, and this is an organ in our body, the brain, and it's only one that you get in your lifetime. So my brothers and sisters, don't take chances with it. Don't take chances with it. It needs looking after. And if it involves effort, I think it's a worthwhile effort to put into it, because there's no spare. I hope I've answered your question.
Yeah, that was an interesting one. I think what I took out of your question is more of helping somebody else and how to help the person. So I guess because of what we've already shared about lack of awareness and the shame attached to mental health, even though you might see your friend behaving in a certain way, but then you don't know how to approach it. I think it's about time we start having things like maybe once a month, where it will be like a drop-in session where people can go and say something about something wrong with them. But that is something that can be done after this. But having said that, if you see a friend who is struggling, don't be shy to ask. Sometimes when we feel like we don't have the answers, okay, we feel like then we are going to shy away from it. Even if you don't know what to do, just tell them to go and see their GP, okay? Because the GP is a point of getting into a mental health, what do you call it, sector. But the thing is, until also we stop thinking mental health is a big issue that we cannot address, then nothing is going to change. Because when you see your brother or your sister struggling today, tomorrow it might be you. So if you think about the fact that it's happening to them doesn't mean it can happen to you, then you will be willing to help. For example, let's say if you saw a friend with a broken leg and they were hopping on their leg, what would you do? Would you ask them why? Or would you ask them whether they need some support? Anybody want to answer that? Will you say anything to them? If you see somebody with a broken leg and they are hopping. Anybody?
Can you ask them when they need support?
You will ask them whether they need. Why would you ask that question?
Well, it is maybe you think that you feel that you can offer it, so that's why you are asking.
Thank you.
Maybe they need more.
Thank you. But the thing is because we've normalized physical health issues. Okay? When you see somebody with a broken leg, society has made it okay for us to show that broken leg and for somebody to ask you, what help do you need? But when it comes to mental health issues, it's inside our brain. Nobody sees it. You can see somebody who is kind of dressed up with designer clothes, but they are suffering inside. That designer clothes is to cover up what they don't want other people to see. So you see, if you can have the courage to ask a friend with a broken leg, can I help you? What is wrong with you? Please use that same mindset and ask your friend, I see you are behaving oddly these days. Is there anything wrong with you? It's an okay question to ask. And today, as a professional, I want to give everybody the permission to be able to ask that question. You're not being interrogative, you are actually helping the person. And that is how we can start this conversation. Jazakumullah khairan.
I think there was another question at the back.
My question is, I've gotten the answers. I think yes. Yeah, you've answered. You've answered the question. Another one.
Assalamu alaikum. My sister, if you are saying that we should try to help ourselves or by inquiring from our friends. So are we really talking about a typical Zango person or any other person? Because I think you understand the question.
Jazakallah khairan for the question. Yes, I'm talking about typical Zongo person. And I'm saying that because that is the root of the cause of our problems. Nobody created by Allah cannot change unless they refuse to change. Until we are ready to actually civilize our Zongo community, nothing is going to change. And I guess you are asking that because of the defense mechanism that people have when you ask them these questions. And also, not just that, they go and tell other people. It's almost like somebody's health issues becomes the talk of the town. When people start laughing, oh, Bakajiba, we made a laughing, come on, how come I came down? I mean, hello, you that you are saying that, do you know even yourself that you are also suffering from mental health issues? Because if you're not suffering from mental health issues, you will not actually make it a topic to discuss with somebody else. So I'm talking about the Zongo community, how this is eating us up. Pandemic came, we're all scared of it. The pandemic in our community is killing us. And as a result, we are losing our children, we are losing our generation. Our kids are getting to an age whereby they don't want to associate with us. I don't know whether some of you have noticed. From young age, when you go into parties and Suna and Aure, they are happy to follow us. But then, as they grow and they take on the Western life and they weigh it with our lifestyle, you tell them, oh, it's boring. Can't understand. So the thing here is, I'm talking about a typical Zongo community because do we want to change or do we want to remain like this? Back home, it's easy for us to be the way we are because even when it comes to bringing up our kids, there is some uncle or a next door neighbor who will scold your kid. They don't have all these gadgets. So bringing up a child is contained. But in this country, it's not. So, if we are not seeking support and actually making it okay to be vulnerable, and that's where the word is, being vulnerable is something that we have to learn to accept it. If you learn to accept vulnerability, even if you tell somebody your issue, and they go making you a laughing stock, one day, in the same community, that same person will realize they made a big mistake because it's going to happen to them. Because when it comes to mental health, right, the evidence-based research is showing that 1 in 4 of us will have mental health issues through different, let's say, difficulties. So as we are sat here, some of us, including myself, is suffering from some form of mental health issue.
It's true.
But in our community, when we think about mental health issues, we think about yai hauka. What do you mean by yai hauka? We have to start dissecting that word, yai hauka. If we can start dissecting that word, then, yes, in our typical Zongo community, we will start addressing these issues. Jazakumullah khairan.
I think the key part is education for ourselves to understand or is it about why is it important to remain well? Why is your body an amana? And why is your brain an amana? And anything that you are home, you'll be asked as to how you spend it, how you use it. What are the measures you put in place to stay well? Were you following reality or were you following your own desires? Like we said, if the prophets were vulnerable and they were able to express their vulnerability through their Creator, who are you to say that you must not show vulnerability? Where is that coming from? Is it spiritual or cultural? And if it's cultural, what are you prioritizing? Your cultural belief or your spiritual belief? And this is a question all of us need to ask ourselves. So when a fellow human being is struggling, and you make it your point to make it problematic and to make the issue worse for them, how are you as a person? What motivates your action? What do you stand to gain from that? If the tables were turned, would you like to be at the receiving end of that? So it starts with self-compassion, stepping into the shoe of the other person, like it's your brother, like it's your sister, like it's yourself. When we start to have that love for us, for each other, then we'll feel the pain of each other. They are saying that the Muslim body is the same. But are we behaving like the Muslim body is the same? We are waiting to have any mishap and then straight away we've shared it to other people. So I hold myself accountable, I hold each other accountable to recognize that we are not made of steel. Life happens. We can be affected by life circumstance. You know, I could be the strongest person years and years, but towards the later part, things start to happen. We spoke about the cumulative impact. So over time, I've run out of space. Things that never used to bother me now affects me. So at that point in time, even though many years ago I was strong, now I'm in a condition that state-wide, physically, mentally, I'm affected. But if I can't seek help within my own community for it to be respected, brothers and sisters, where can I take it? So we'll end up hurting ourselves. And then what happens? People come up and behave in a way that is contrary to how we've known you. But we haven't seen her like that before. But he's hiding it until he gets to a point that I couldn't take it anymore. And then it explodes. So I urge you and myself, this is not a shameful thing. This is the thing that we need to be doing as communities and to be able to eradicate this stigma, because the stigma that we are having is actually not really a real issue. It's our misunderstanding of wellness. If you can take your car for a service and not complain, is it wrong to take your brain? Given the fact that actually you can replace a car, but you can't replace your brain. So I think it comes back to understanding of why it's important to maintain our wellness, and any act that it involves, whether it's someone from Zongo or someone in other communities, is the same brain, and we've all been given one. So it's our responsibility. We actually should take pride in looking after ourselves in those regards. Similar to you see some people washing their cars, giving them all those gadgets. What about the soft brain? When was the last time you serviced it? I hope it makes sense.
My question is, what we see on television and news, this one stop this one stop that one, and other youth seeing this, and later they end up being a friend to those who are doing that. What did they see? And then that may encourage them to go in that situation or to go in that group. And they know the consequence. This group is not right. And if I act this way I'm going to end. And still pushing himself to that group. What's the question?
Thank you. It's a very important question, and it's not something that we are seeing in our clinic very regularly in this regard. The input of parents is becoming less because of the competition with other parents. It's not other parents, you have other people on the platform that, excuse me to say, don't have spiritual understanding. So some of the things they suggest for children to do, it's easier to do. So you trying to put your values, your boundaries in place, it seems like hard work. So these other interventions that they have exposure to is more pronounced, it's more impactful to them because it's easier to do. Now, when you have a child being brought up by the perspective of a child, or the perspective of someone that doesn't see consequence, you are 18, you can go and do whatever you want. What is the consequence? So the perspective is changed. When the perspective is changed, what is fashionable in the eyes of those groups? For example, we are tribal species and we would like to belong. Now, if someone is perceived as, for example, is the trauma that is presented, because of that, he's actually getting more likes for his behavior. He's getting more likes for being in that situation. How many viral impact has he made? For a child that is looking at it, if he's not well guided, it becomes more fashionable. And then the other bit is that, so they like to belong because he sees that is more fashionable, but also because there is no consequence. There's no deterrent. When you look at it now, I think as recent as April last year, there was, in the whole United Kingdom, there was, I think, about 1,200 places left in prisons. Because the prisons are a luxury place now, so there's no consequence. So if there is no consequence, whatever I do, I go there, there's a gym, I even become even more bigger, I eat freely, I even get paid. So there's nothing to be afraid of. And therefore, when there is no consequence and there is no boundaries, and the boundary violations are not respected, even the means to set the system for people to turn around is a place of comfort. Then what's the need for change? And as a result, people see it and there's no deterrent. And because there is no deterrent, you're more likely to repeat when there are no consequences. Unfortunately, all these things are impacting on our children. You see it, there's no any remorse, there's no apologies. Even people condone and aspire to be like that. May Allah protect us and our children from these kind of images that we are seeing on our phone service.
My question is, looking at these two mental illnesses, depression and anxiety, can we say, is it always the case that they happen as a result of trauma, or there could be any kind of question has been very beneficial to me. And I think I've been dealing with it from I didn't know.
After being
Okay.
for the brother to even own up this is what we want to know.
So there was something that I experienced when I was in junior high school. It has to do with an health issue. What happened was, I had a friend next to me in class, and at that time we didn't educated about sexual transmitted disease and all this, you know. So one day we were in class, all of a sudden, I was just minding my own business. All of a sudden, before I could realize, there was blood coming out of my eye. I don't know where you got this sharp object from. So since then, I've been suffering with this in my head. Is it possible that I've contracted any serious disease? I battled with this for almost 15 years. To an extent that even if I had to go to a barber shop to get my hair cut off, it's a problem. Because I need to be sure if everything is being sanitized. So till today, I'm battling that. So now, how can I be able to come out of this? When it comes to the issue, Islamic, regards to tawakkul, as a student pursuing Islamic knowledge, I understand that aspect. And I have that trust fully in Allah. But I don't know if I need a therapy to deal with this. Yeah, that's my question. And if there's any contributing factor with regards to the depression and anxiety.
It's possible to have what we call a secondary response to a primary response. If the primary response is trauma, you can have a secondary response of anxiety and depression. Why? Because sometimes say the first 10 years of having that's 80,732 hours. Now imagine your mind playing something for 80,000. And then the other 5 years is about 40,000 hours. So you are having something repeated for over 12,000 hours. Imagine putting something on fire for 12,000 hours. The impact it will have on you. So it's restructuring what had happened. The first thing is to clear the doubt. You have to get yourself checked to make sure that what you are fearing isn't in your bloodstream. Now, once you've established that, now the fear that is coming out of it is the memory of what you've been through. But the memory, if it's not refined, not real. So that is what you'll be reacting to. Even though it's happened 15 years ago, it's still affecting your life now. Why people ask me? Because it's not the memory, it's how you see the world. So when you see the barber shop, you go back to the glass, you take out that eyes, and then you look at those things there. So that's a traumatic freeze. So even though years has passed, the memory is still frozen, and every time a contextual exploration comes out, which is something that you can be hurt, blood will come, it's almost brings itself as if you've never moved on. Am I making sense? So what we do is to modify the brain and how the brain is responding to that. Now what we do, in treatment, we can get the brain to recognize that that's a memory, it happened in Ghana, but this is not Ghana, the location is different. But every location in the minds of the brain looks the same until you correct it. Unfortunately, when you start feeling anxious, the memory of how it was gets triggered, and then all of a sudden it's affecting your life now. So then and now there's no differentiation, which then means that you are reliving the memory of the trauma. Am I making sense? So to overcome it, we need to correct it, to recognize that I'm not in that place anymore. So what I'm having is what we call a somatic response. My body is reacting like I've not changed, but the circumstance is different. So instead of becoming tense, we ask you to relax your shoulders, breathe differently, recognizing that your brain at that moment in time, because of the trauma, is frozen. It needs your help. So when you are using it to guide you, it's a muscle. It can't guide you. You have to correct the mistake that it's making. So over time, it resets itself, and then you can be free from it. Did that make sense? Alhamdulillah.
I'm so pleased for you to own up to what you've just done. You may not realize the impact you've had on a lot of people in this room right now, but what I want everybody to ask themselves is, our brother has just shared something that he's been going through for 15 good years. But you all see him, you don't know he's carrying this with him. Does it mean we are going to go out of this room now and be laughing at him as a laughing stock because he shared that? Do we? Is that what we are going to do? So that is the Zongo changing. That is the Zongo changing. For him to own up to share what he has shared right now, that is us beginning to change our Zongo. Because it's changeable. And brother, let me tell you, yes, I'm glad you said you are specializing in the Quran. But if you go in the Quran, you realize that science is from the Quran. And because science is from the Quran, that is why therapy is real. When I was training as a therapist, before I went into it, we were made to believe therapy is for the white man. And through all the research and everything that I went through, one thing that I became aware of is therapy is from the Quran. Therapy tells us not to be judgmental. It tells us to give people the safe place to talk about their difficulties and not share it with anybody. And it also tells us that irrespective of how somebody has committed a crime, it's not your place to judge that person. And that is in the Quran. Because it's Allah who will deal with that, not us. So what I'm trying to say here is, I want us to know that therapy is not for the white man. Therapy is from the Quran. So if, I know we've got a lot of shades in this room, so I'm not going to be stepping on people's toes because I don't know much about the Quran. But what I do know is, Anabi Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, after he's finished his prayers, he sits in the masjid, people come to him with their problems. That is therapy. Are we aware of that? It's therapy. So, why should a Zongo person laugh at another Zongo person for having issues? When all these issues have been had before our generation. So, what you just shared there, be similar, it can be fixed. And I'm sure Brother Miftau will connect with you and have a one-to-one with you, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan.
Just before you answer one question, I'm just going to ask one question about what you mentioned previously about parenting and the effects of trauma and inheritance children. So I wanted to ask, what type of signs should parents look for with their children that may suggest that they may be suffering from trauma? What type of signs would a child have?
That's an important question. When you look at a child growing up with symptoms of trauma, sometimes they wake up in a state of panic. They will be in a state of sweat. The bed is wet because you can see them breathing very intensely. They will also, some of the big, because of what happens at night and what they see, the impact, the images, sometimes they become hesitant in wanting to go to bed. because they are afraid of what they might see when they go to bed. Now, because of that, their sleep is very limited. And because their sleep is limited, you can also see the effect of that in their ability to concentrate. Because to charge your brain, if you charge your brain, you will have space to think. If you are not sleeping properly, the space you have is very small. It affects your concentration. So they become easily distracted. We become easily absent-minded. They also have, because of also lack of sleep, it also becomes difficult to motivate themselves. Because they lack mental energy. Because if you lack the mental energy, you can't motivate yourself because you are restless. Now, this also can start not feeling good about themselves. When you want to, them to try something, because they know they don't have the energy to see it through, they become very avoidant. Which also means that in terms of schoolwork, they will be constantly behind. And because they are constantly behind in the school, sometimes it can turn into frustration, where they don't sit to do the work, not because they don't like the work, because if they produce it, they know it's not going to be to standard, so they will distract themselves instead. Because it's easier then to not do the work that way. Now, so their pattern becomes very disruptive. Now, is it deliberate? No. It's a form of inner protection. When I know what is coming, I'll just protect myself. Unfortunately, this kind of protection is not a healthy protection. It's in response to a state they are in that they don't know how to get rid of. But societal pressure also increases because they compare themselves with other children, and they can see that they are not really at the level of those children. But what they are going through makes sense. If they have all these things there, they cannot function like another child. That's not because they are incapable, because they've got a problem that needs addressing. Now, if the parent doesn't acknowledge there's a problem, they'll say, why can't you be like your brother? But I can't be like my brother because my circumstance is not that of my brother. So even that also leads to the child feeling unworthy. So all these things then cumulatively can lead to a child all of a sudden get to a point where they give up and they become very frozen. Sometimes they don't even want to talk because when they talk, you're gonna dig deep. Because they don't have the energy, they say, keep telling, I don't know. Because they don't have the space to even have the conversation. These are the cumulative impacts that potentially can happen to a child that has gone through traumatic experience because they feel ashamed, and because they feel ashamed, they don't want to talk. Because they don't want to talk, there is nothing you can do about it, but this thing will continue to eat away at them. Allah help us and support us to be able to have an understanding and be able to support our kids with the struggling that they have. And also there are other bits also that I can add to it. Since COVID, we had a wartime environment in the state, and when COVID went over, we weren't giving any psychological support. We were just told it's all over, go back. So why is the kids keeping all these memories? How is it affecting them on a daily basis? 1 minute I'll start with somebody, all of a sudden I can't sit with that person, I have to go over there. And then a few months later, I can return and sit with the person. How is it affecting children? How is it affecting connection? Because some of them is their early years of formation where things get taken almost naturally. So I was connecting with people and then it stopped. Now I'm asked to go back, but I've already developed the habit of keeping my distance. And then that translates to how they communicate. So it's up to us, maybe as families, sometimes it's easier to meet the child with the phone, but also because this ability to process need a human interaction. Maybe it's getting as a point, maybe if you're already not doing it, maybe I can suggest, have times where there is no phone communication, there's human communication. It's a skill. If you never really learn to develop it, you can't develop it because you are older. And in my clinic, I'm having a lot of referrals for children, young people that don't know how to communicate with each other. It's not that they don't have the capability, but they don't have the exposure. Because if you are talking, it's easier to talk to an object than to talk to a person. So when you are becoming good at talking to an object, talking to a person becomes very difficult. To be able to talk to a person, you have to practice with the person, so that you can be able to read the room. So when the only thing I have is an object I'm looking at, I wouldn't be able to know how to read the temperature in the room. Because to be able to do that, I'll need to have practiced it. And if I don't have that practice, I become an adult that cannot be able to express himself, that cannot be able to get people's mood. Because to be able to get the people's mood is a skill. How many times back home where your auntie has come and you are in the room and your dad will come and go and say hello? Why is that? Because it's a skill. If you don't do it, you come into a public and then you can't be able to do it because you haven't had the training. So this object that is taking a lot of space. And it's taking the ability of the children to be able to engage in a healthy way. And it's that big that now some are bringing their children to come and learn these things to be able to relearn it. It's not too late. We have madrasa, we have our communities. What we can start to do is that sometimes when we have this time, we should have time within the madrasa time let's talk about what is going on, where it's actually a conversation. Because when you think about it, and I read somewhere when we were looking at a situation where a child grows up where there's a grandparent, there's parents, there's uncles, there's aunties. A 10-year-old growing up in that environment, their emotional intelligence level is about the level of a 21-year-old now that has grown up with an environment where there is no that kind of support. Because they are able to read, you are sitting with your grandparents, you see how they talk, you are able to probably take that on. You are able to, no, don't say it that way, try it this way. Now the rooms, the houses are small, we are busy working, there's no time. So how are we going to help ourselves? It's come down to our communities to create this atmosphere where these things are practiced. Other than that, we will have adults that cannot communicate. But society expects them to, and then therefore they don't come because they don't want to face the shame.
So I'm just going to add on to what Miftau said. So the question was to do with how does trauma manifest in our children. I don't know whether anybody is aware of. There is this disability called selective mutism. So when we talk about selective mutism, it's about, it affects adults, but it's very common in children. When a child is growing in a home, when there is a lot of domestic abuse going on, it can delay their development to their speech. So some of the kids, you take them to school, they will never say a word till they come home. Selective mutism can also lead to stuttering. When a child is expressing themselves, the words are not coming out because of the level of trauma that they've witnessed in the family home. So if you see a child, especially under the age of 5, and they've not developed in their speech, please go to your GP and they will refer you to a speech therapist. Speech therapists can help those kids to get their voice back because the trauma they see makes the brain not develop. And when the brain is not developed, unfortunately, that's selective mutism. Sometimes you take the kids to somewhere, they don't talk, they come home, you scold them, just even by talking that way, it's traumatic for that child because that child is already struggling. You are shouting on that child in the house not to speak, but then when he gets out, you want that child to be another character and be able to mingle with everybody. It's not going to happen. So selective mutism is one of the things that affects our children when it comes to trauma that we witness or experience. The other thing that kids experience these days that is very common that we see in our services is self-harm. In our community, there was a day I saw this girl, and because of the job we do, we can see when somebody is self-harming. And I called this girl to her side and I asked her, what are these marks on your hand? And she just laughed it off. So I was asking her, no, it's self-harm. A lot of our children are doing it, and they are doing it in places that you can't see. Because social media is telling them that is the way they can release their emotion and their traumatic experiences. Some of them use blades to cut themselves in places that they wear clothes you cannot see. Some of them pull their hair. Some of them develop eating disorder. They don't eat. It's trauma response. That's the only thing they've got control over, and that's how they are managing their emotions. So if you have a child who doesn't eat and they are underweight, please contact your GP and get them checked. The other thing that also affects kids is OCD, obsessive compulsory disorder. Does anybody know what that is? Yeah. They become so clean. They clean and clean and clean. And sometimes we see these things and we're like, oh, so clean is she. It's a way of dealing with trauma. So you see, trauma can manifest in so many different ways that we don't know. Because that kind of behavior that a person is showing is become their coping mechanism. But unfortunately, that coping mechanism is unhealthy and they need support. So with kids, support is there through counts. It's either you go to your GP, and a lot of you that are in high schools, you know there are counseling and support in high schools. Speak to the safeguarding staffs because these things are real and stealing our kids. I think the last one on that is distraction. When a child sees too many traumas in the house, they can become distracted in school. Even the way they play outside. It's a response to trauma sometimes. But some of them may have ADHD. That is a different thing altogether that we are not going to talk about it today. But the thing is, today what we are doing is we are just touching base. There is so much in trauma that we cannot use 2-3 hours to talk about. But these are some of the things I think affect our community. And the last one is low self-esteem. The low self-esteem can be found in adults, it can be found in children. A lot of our children have become so much that they don't have the confidence. They don't have self-confidence because of the trauma they carry from what they've experienced and what they have witnessed. If you have a child who you feel they are not confident in themselves, have a conversation with them. If you can't have that conversation, ask them to speak to somebody in their school. Because majority of the time, when we talk about problems, the first thing that comes into our mind is social services. If they go and share this in school, the next minute we are going to see social services at our door. It's not the case. It's not always the case. There is so much kids can learn, and there's so much help out there. We've got a list that we are going to share with you because I've done a research in Birmingham, and I'm going to share some of the mental health places and how you can contact them and get some help if you need support. Jazakumullahu khairan.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So come send mun gode ma doctor Miftau da Hajia Fati kan mata kuma sun fito nisa discussion yayi kyau matukan kyau mun ba su sun ji alko gobe kuma muna zuwa nan kan mata kuma sun fito nisa. They have 3 hours journey da mun bar su dakanta nan mun karbi only one caution 8:45 inshallah shemu adua shemu sallame su mun da ran we part 2 of this program inshallah. But we will continue Gariwa inshallah. We only going to have one question. We get to 5 inshallah.
Consider 2 questions.
2 questions. Come on, what do you have?
Okay, my question is, since I was listening to doctor and my sister, they're always saying you have to contact your GP, therapy, all these things. But in our Zongo community, with this kind of situations, we take it to go and see man of Rukia, all these things. So I want to know the difference between Rukia with Jimmy or Rukia with
So the Quran on there.
Yeah, that is a very, very important question to us. And it's true. Rukia has got its place in our deen, for sure. But it's just like, you know, when you have a broken leg, I keep using this because in our services and in the work we do, it's easy for people to relate with things like that because we've all accepted it's okay to talk about these things. So for example, when you have a broken leg and you are in pain, right? You get given medication, so painkillers, to ease the pain. But for you to then start walking again, you go to physio. Medication is 1, physio is 2. And then the third thing is the people, your loved ones that are there to support you. So Rukia has its place in our deen, in our society, but let's not just stop there. Because the science is also coming from the Quran, just like the Rukia is coming from the Quran. And so is medication. Because sometimes some of us will need medication to be able to work in therapy and to be able to also do the Rukia. So you see, we are not talking about one thing to fix a problem. Every problem should have about 4 or 5 things that is going to support to actually cure that thing. So, I don't know whether I've answered your question, but let's not rely solely on the Rukia. Jazakallah.
There's also one more question at the back, if we'd like to answer that. I think he wants to ask something.
If you are overly tired and you are struggling to go to sleep, you might not be able to have the energy to get up in the morning. Now we can recite the Quran over you, but you also have to change that behavior. similar to how the Prophet is telling us, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, tie the camel, then you can trust it in the hands of Allah. So if you are not sleeping till 3 a.m. and you go to school at 7, and then you want to sleep over that period, now that's not the fault of the dua, it's your behavior. And that behavior needs to be modified. So if you don't modify that behavior, you can't cheat the science that you are sleeping 3 hours, you need 8 hours sleep. How are you going to get out? So that behavior needs to be addressed. And then we make dua for you. And then it will help the whole process. Until you change that course, you haven't changed your condition. How are you going to make the same Allah is telling you that tie the camel and then do what you need to do in those regards. Other than that, you will almost escalating your belief system to a level that is not realistic, because the same Allah is telling us that mankind is weak. So don't run onto a coming vehicle and say Allah will protect you. So similar to when you are depressed, and the depression is coming as a result of a behavior. That behavior needs to be modified, and then you make your tawakkul.
Last question.
We've not had any question from the female, so after this question, if we can have one.
The female, at least one question.
But let's have one of the brothers.
No, the brother can wait. Let's finish. Brother can wait. Abass, Umar. The mic.
No. Give her.
Mic to them.
Regarding marriages, a lot of our sisters going through a lot. And even if they come out to ask for like an advice, all we say is, yeah, somebody and I don't think it's right. So due to that, we as females, we are going through a lot. This depression that you're talking about, I would say about 50 or 60% of women are going through it, but we can't talk about it. So how do you deal with a friend or a sister discussing with you about issue, how the man is treating her or the family? How do you deal with that?
Thank you. Jazakallah khairan.
Cream agada.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi. You know, when we talk about marriage, it touches on a lot of nerves because of the defense we take when it comes to marriage. But what we need to know is, two people are coming from different backgrounds to form a union. And that union means they are going to get to know each other. But unfortunately, again, our cultural values has taken over our religious values and is killing our marriages. And that caused a lot of trauma in the house. So thank you, my sister, for bringing this up, because what you are saying there is 100% true. When it comes to ayi hankuri, it's coming from the fact that in our communities, when a female is getting married, she gets called, sat down by elders, and she gets advised. The male never gets told anything. But unfortunately, the male is supposed to be the head of the family. And being the head of the family, from what the Quran is telling us, you should be the shield of your family. And being the shield of your family is not about being masculine in a way that you're going to put your wife down. Because that woman is delicate. But how many of us know that? So unfortunately, our sisters go into marriages and they want to be super women. They want to be able to do everything from head to toe. And being that person, unfortunately in our community, that's why your family want to marry. But the thing is, that person is not able to exhibit the person they are inside. Because what they are putting up is a facade to please the marriage and to please society. Therefore, unfortunately, a lot of women go into marriage thinking it's their responsibility for the marriage to work. So, marriage is an investment. A woman comes into marriage sometimes with 90% investment, and excuse me to say, some men come in with 10% investment. Because as long as they can work and bring money, that's it. But our dean didn't say that. So, then we find ourselves in a Western world, where, especially in UK, I don't know whether any of you are aware that some of the laws in UK is coming from Sharia laws. Anybody know that? And what are Sharia laws? Sharia laws are coming from our Quran. Then, what do you call it? The advantage that they're giving to women in this country when it comes to parenting, in terms of benefits and all these things, is because they know when a woman is got the money will go to the kids. It's automatic because of, I think, the way Allah have made a woman to be more empathetic. So, when a woman goes into marriage and they play all these cards to be a wife-worthy material and doing everything, unfortunately, what then gets missed is that person is not being the real person they are. And then after they've gone into the marriage, and kids start coming, no woman on this earth goes into marriage, whether you've had a kid or not, and after 10 years, you will have that same strength that you had 10 years ago. No woman. Every woman goes through a lot of hormonal changes. And so does every woman develop the brain. So for example, when we have children, from when they were in our womb, from when they are born, and they start walking, they start talking, and they get to an age when we talk, they challenge us back. But unfortunately in our communities, when a man marries a woman, especially when the woman is being brought into this diaspora, she shouldn't challenge. The woman is not supposed to talk back. Because when they start talking back, so the woman's ideas are not taken. So the woman then starts suppressing and suppressing and suppressing their emotion. Please tell me, where does that say in the Quran that a man should be entitled to abuse their wife, irrespective of what she's trying to share? Yes, women, we can talk. Yes, we can be emotional. But that happened in our prophet days before he got here. So if we are going to go with the Quran, then we have to know these things are real. So depression in our community, yes, is killing our women. But the thing is, We shouldn't tell the women, we should sit them down and ask them some questions. What is it you are struggling with? If a friend, you cannot help your friend, please tell them to go and see their GP. And again, I have that belief that it's about time we start having what we call a group session where people will come and they can express themselves. But the thing is, in the Zongo community, a lot of these women, the way they cope with their depression is they buy stuff, they look good, they come out when it's Aure and Suna, and everybody, oh, that is how we deal with our depression. We do. But having said that, domestic abuse is not just a man or a woman. Domestic abuse can be a woman abusing the husband. And it is in our society. Especially some of our sisters, when they come and they understand the system and they know the system is on their side, they use that against their husbands. And statistically, So, but that's the thing. So there are a lot of men that are suffering. Just recently ago, there was a research that was done, a survey. And this survey was done in such a way that if you go on YouTube, you find it. And this, they were using the Westerners. So there was a woman and a man in a public place. And the guy started harassing the woman. And the moment public saw that, people started rushing onto the man because they can tell that man is abusing that woman. And then some of the men took the lady away, not to go with the guy. Okay? Because that's what society knows, that men abuse women. After that scenario, another scenario was played. And this time, the woman was abusing the man to the extent that she was even pushing and beating him. And what passes by were doing is, they just laugh. Yes. They were showing the man as a weak man. That's what you just said. And as a result, now in our society, the domestic abuse of men is escalating, but they don't come out and say it. So men are also suffering with depression when it comes to the fact that they don't feel they are man enough in their homes. So yes, it's affecting our sisters, but also yes, it's affecting our brothers. So we all have to do some work. And please, when you meet in the masjid, or when you hear somebody's wife is very, very controlling the husband, don't laugh, because she do it. Wallahi, she did. We hear it all the time. How do you expect that brother to come out to talk about his issues when he's become a laughing stock in his own community? It's just not going to work. So, in as much as I want us to have a space for our sisters to be able to come out, and it's not about it's about addressing the issue. If you know a husband who is maltreating their wife, please don't say, well, no, I'm going to be dying. Because what affects your sister affects you. What affects your brother affects you. And it affects the whole community. I'm going to stop there because I can go on and on about this topic. Jazakumullah khair.
Barakallahu fikum. Miftau Hajia Fati, mmoja Mungu doganga
upon myself to look at Birmingham, how to service mental health services. It's similar to where I work because in what do you call it? In Manchester, and I think it's across NHS, what they've done is because they know minorities don't like seeking support. Now we've got interpreters in the services. And people like myself have become champions whereby we go to churches, mosques to educate our people and encourage them to come out and seek support. So I thought it would be wise for me to find how to do referrals in Birmingham. And I think the service here for NHS is called Birmingham Healthy Mind Service. There is a number on here that you can call. If you don't want to contact your GP, there is a self-referral number on this that you can call. And speak to them directly. Normally they take you through stages, you do assessments, and then they will determine who do you get to see. So in NHS, we've got what we call the step model. If you come with issues, we have the level that is needed. They will start with you, and if they realize your difficulties are not what they can deal with, then they will step you up. So we've got that step up kind of model. So you get to a place where you get to see ourselves, depending on how complex your case is. So please, when they start asking you questions, and this I've heard this so many times, people become uncomfortable about some of the questions they get asked. But what you have to know is, if that person doesn't ask you those questions, how are they going to understand your problem? In as much as it's uncomfortable, it's through that uncomfortness that you are going to get your healing. So please, when you get put on the waiting list, don't drop out if you know you are struggling, so that you can get that. So I'll give this to the chairman and the elders of the community to maybe they can be as big as they can, and I will encourage you to put it on a board where everybody can take a photograph of it. So you've got it on your phone. If you have a photograph of it, you can give it a try. And try and see what comes out of it. Because we all need therapy. Jazakumullah khairan.
Thank you, Hajia Fati. Thank you for Abass. Thank you for Miftau. Thank you for the man of the Lord coming here and the last dua. And then we see our guest, inshallah, who was here to the Baho. So the program, inshallah. Yeah.
I know you are in a hurry. Can I just say, based on what we've done today, I'm just thinking to set the ball rolling. I want to volunteer, especially our young girls growing up, to have a group where I would love to sit and speak to them, and they can tell me some of the things they need to help them in sense of growth and mental awareness. And I'm going to urge maybe Brother Miftau to look into whether we can have a similar thing for the young youth male in a way of, because sometimes when we sit and we just talk and there is no action plan, then it's almost like that's it. But I feel we have to follow it with an action. So I'll leave this to the chairman to discuss with the community, discuss with parents, because we need parents' consent. If parents are willing for their kids to join that group that I want to lead and see our youngsters having some support, then please let me know and I'll be willing to do that. I don't know whether you have something to say about that.
I think another thing is, I think it's a valuable opportunity for us to learn how to not carry that generation from to the next yesterday, but to do that, we need information to be able to transform it. We also need an environment where there is our Islamic culture is still involved, so that we don't really dilute what we are teaching. So I think it's going to help, but the context in which we do it is going to be very, very important.
Inshallah. So one way, inshallah, we're going to benefit from this, the ladies, the parents, and then we'll open this platform, inshallah. Not only today, it should be something that we can learn about, inshallah. The guests are ready, we're going to work with them, inshallah. Then the chairman in the madrasa, one of them, we go around there, we say right now.
I want to use this opportunity to thank our Sheikh Miftau and his wife, and also participating in this event today, inshallah. As this is just the beginning. We're not going to finish it today. You have our time to visit them, because it's a new teaching. We always used to hear Allah, and today is different, inshallah. As they said, trauma is a disease. Trauma is a disease. And Prophet said, the devil والذي خلق الداعي خلق الدواء. We should look for remedy. We should look for therapy. We should look for healing, because the one who created the disease is the one who created the disease. So trauma, we should understand trauma is different from as din. For din to touch us is two differences. It happened to me one time in this community. I don't want to mention names, but one of us falling into challenges, and the people start going to wow. Okay. He needed a therapy. So take a therapy. Inshallah, do that. The person he get it. So this kind of discussion needs to continue all the time. We need to emphasize on it, and we will make sure that they will come back again, meet our youth, so that the community is growing. The more you grow, the more challenges. So we need it. We need it. And one thing that I say, that the trauma is isolation. So we encourage everybody. Don't isolate yourself. When you start isolating yourself, you have to realize that you'll be touched by trauma. اللهم تقبل منا انك السميع العليم وتوب علينا يا مولانا انك التواب الرحيم. اللهم اجعل جمعنا هذا جمعا مرحوما وتفرقنا من تفرقا معصوما. اللهم لا تجعل فينا ولا منا ولا مشقى ولا مغفرة. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين الحمد لله.